welcome to Pay It Forward. I thought it was time to add to my little shelf sitter series. I've got a few of these. You may have seen my little cow. This one is made just the same as that one. In this is just a little teddy bear. He's got his lovely little overalls on. You can do a whole lot of detailing work on those, and it's a very simple pattern. You can make him up in fabrics and in felt. And it's a great beginner pattern too, so really easy. So all you need to do is click on that link in the description below. You'll find your link to your free pattern templates. Now when you go to print them out, make sure that you set your printer to print at actual size so that it doesn't do any resizing or anything, because we want your pattern templates to be absolutely spot on. And I always include all of the seam allowances in my patterns. It just makes it so much easier for everybody. So I hope you're going to enjoy making my little teddy bear shelf sitter. So let's have a look at what we're going to need today to make our little shelf sitter. Now I'm actually making mine up entirely in felt. You can actually make this one up in fabrics if you like, but you will need to make the little head up in felt just because of the way that it's put together. Or alternatively, you could just add the little overalls. They could be fabric and make everything else felt. But the way that we do it is we have a front body piece, which is basically your teddy bear's colour, whatever you choose, and your back body piece will be the same fabric or felt that you're using for the little overalls that go on. The reason for that is once we start putting it all together, you're going to see that we get this illusion of our little bear having his hands in his pockets, and that works better if we have the colour of the little overalls on the back as well. So to start with, I have both of those interfaced with my medium weight fusible woven interfacing. Both of those felt pieces, if you're using fabric, you must interface them as well. So there I have my two colours. Then we're going to need our little overall pieces, and as I said, this could be fabric if you like. Make sure that you have your fusible webbing on the back, your heat and bond, because they are going to be pressed onto the front there. And you're also going to need a bit of detailing for our little overalls. A little one with the heat and bond on the back too. That's our little patch pocket that will go on there. You can add a little patch to the little top of the thigh there, and that's just got your heat and bond as well. Just a little scrap. It's really something nice and bright and obvious. You will need a couple of little buttons because we're going to be adding those to make that look like they've got little straps there. Just something that coordinates, and you can also add something to this little pocket as well, whatever you like. I'm just going to be putting that tiny little heart button there. Now we're going to be doing all sorts of stitching on these overalls which will make it look very, very real. And so that's our body section. We also need a base for this little one to stand up. Now I'm using a 50mm wooden disc because I have one. I've given you the template though. You can, if you don't have a wooden disc, you can go ahead and cut that from a picture framer's mat board is best. Just get that from your local picture framer. You'll find that they keep offcuts, and they'll usually give them to you. So I generally cut two of those and glue two together so that it is as strong as a little wooden disc. So you have that one all cut and ready. And you will also need a little felt disc which has our same interfacing, and that's for the base because we like to add a little base and do some stitching around it for a really nice neat finish. And then we move on to our little head pieces. So we have our front and back head pieces, and I'm using that same teddy bear colour of the honey. They are both interfaced. So we've got those. Now there's some layering that happens here with this little face so that we can get all these lovely details. So first of all, we're going to need a filler for the head, and that I've cut that one from stiffened felt. Stiffened felt is very easy to find. It's available in most of your craft stores. If you don't have stiffened felt, you could just use an extra piece of felt if you like, preferably one that's got interfacing. We just need those little heads to be nice and firm. So that one will go on first. And then we add our little white piece of felt. That has fusible webbing applied. And that one is going to be fused into place there. And then we're going to put our front face piece on. Now you can see this one's cut from felt with fusible webbing applied, and we've cut out those little circles. Use your very tiny scissors to cut those little circles out, and you'll find that you'll get a nice even little shape. And then we pop that one over, and you can see that we're going to get those lovely whites of those eyes and that little recessed eye, because then we're going to be adding our little eyes in the corners. We can do some lovely side glancing little eyes with that lovely white of the eye effect. You also need your muzzle piece with your fusible webbing applied, and I cut that one from felt also, and that will go into place there. The little nose template also has that fusible webbing applied, and that will be popped on at that time, and we will be stitching a little smile in place there, and then it's all sandwiched together and we create this lovely firm little head to add on. You'll also need a button, which I will grab a button for attaching the head, just something that coordinates as well. And you're going to need, for the construction, we're going to be needing your extra strong threads and or some pearl thread, or you could use stranded cotton for a blanket applique embroidery. I'm going to be using my extra strong Gutermann thread throughout for my sewing and for my embroidery. It's my favourite thread. So our first step with this little project, we're going to be filling with polyester filling. I'm not adding any weight to this one because I don't feel like they need one. Little cow has no weight and she stands up beautifully. And that's about it. So now we can start the very first start on our body here. We do all of our detailing on that front section of the body before we construct the body and put that body together. So it's very easy. You're working on a lovely flat surface. So we start with, you can see how that one lines up beautifully there. We just need to press those little overalls on using a hot iron and a protective cloth. Now once you have those little overalls pressed into place, then you can go ahead and do the same thing with the little patch pocket. Now you can see that that one is just sitting just about, probably about 7mm, about 1/4 of an inch from that top edge there. And I've just pressed that one into place in the same way. And you can also add, if you're going to add a little patch, you can add that one now too. And you can see that that one is just right in the center of one of those legs there. Remember, this will be curling around, so make sure that it's close enough to the center that we're still going to see that once that's curled around. So now I've gone ahead and marked in. Now on your pattern templates, you'll find that there is a little mark, a little spot on your overalls. That's your center point. So I've just taken my ruler and just ruled a line from the base up to that center point. I'm going to be stitching this one in white so that it really stands out. You could use any color you like, but for these sections you really do want these to stand out. This is what's defining our little legs and our little crotch area. So I've used a white gel pen. Just a little tip for working on fabrics, marking on fabrics for cutting out and so on that are dark and particularly felt. White gel pens you can get at your local newsagents or office supplies. They are fabulous because they give you a lovely fine little line, and it's very, very easy to see. So you can see I've ruled up to that little spot, then I've just taken the corner of my ruler and I've just drawn in just that little V section for that little crotch area. And then I have gone ahead and I've just done just a slightly bent line across just a little way from those little corners there, just to mark out the base of that bib section there. So all I'm going to do is sew over those lines now with my white thread on the machine, and I will sew over them 2 times so that they really stand out. So there you can see once that stitching's in place, it's really marked out those little areas. We can see now that it's a little pair of overalls. You can see also I've just gone ahead and stitched around the base lower edge of that little pocket as well. and you can use a different colour, whatever you like there. So I'm staying with the white because it's just making everything stand out so nice and clear. So our next step is to go ahead and I'm going to sew a blanket applique stitch. I'm using my extra strong thread, I've got a knot in the end, and I'm going to be sewing along the pocket edge, right up around the straps, across here. Tops of the straps will be hidden by the head. We're going to come down, around, and all the way down to the other side. I like to sew a blanket applique stitch to do this because it really adds a little bit of volume to those little overalls, and it's just nice to see that bit of hand stitching. I'm also going to do the same thing. I'm going to be using my red and sewing a blanket applique stitch around that patch as well. So you can do both of those on the machine. If you wanted to go ahead and just do a straight stitch right close to the edge, you could do that in perhaps a contrasting thread. You could do a very tight little satin stitch zigzag all the way around. I think if you follow me, you know I love my blanket applique stitch. I love the finish that it gives. So I've just come in from behind right on the edge of that little start of that pocket there, and I'm going to keep my stitches nice and small. So I go through both of the layers and I come out again, taking up some of that bottom layer right on that edge there. Now I do have a video that shows you up close how to sew the blanket applique stitch. I'll put the link up the top there for you if you need some extra help with that. So that's my first stitch in place, and I'm going to continue on with that one. And you could use your stranded cotton, you could use a pearl thread to do this if you want a thicker sort of an effect. I like the detailed little effect that the extra strong thread gives me, and it's a very clean, neat finish. So you can see I'm just keeping my stitches nice and even, and I'm just going to make my way right around that top edge, and then I will do the same thing with my red on my little patch. Now there you can see all of my blanket applique stitching is done on that little patch as well, and you can see I've gone ahead and added my two little buttons at those junctions there and my little heart there. So you can embellish these as much as you like. You can add more patches and so on, different little trims. Just remember, keep the base very simple because this base needs to be pulled in around that disc and we don't want any more layers there. So now we just have to add our body front to our body back, and that is as simple as lining those two pieces up, and we're just going to clip them or pin them into place, make sure all of those edges meet, and now we're going to sew a 4mm seam allowance from the base. We leave the base open, so from the base right around that top edge to the other side of the base there. Make sure you're back and forth on those start and finishes, and I do sew that seam 2 times so it's nice and strong. So once you have that all stitched up, we just need to turn that one through, that little base opening, push that one all the way through there. We're going to push out all of those seams. I just use a large knitting needle. That top section all pushed out. I can see our little body coming together there. Make sure that you roll those seams out so we get a nice clean curve. And you can already see there we've got that lovely little effect happening. Our little hands in pockets there. So now we just go ahead and we start filling our little body. So I'm using my forceps and start by tucking everything right at the top there. Now the back top section is where we're actually going to be adding the head with the button. So this area will be compressed. So you can, as you stuff that section, just be mindful of the fact that if you can keep it packed firm but flattish, if you understand what I mean there, it will be compressed anyway. and you'll find that works just by holding your thumb there and just packing it all in. So I'm going to keep going, and we do want this to be really firm. There's hardly any give in this body at all. And once we get up to the top here, just a little way from the edge, we're going to be using our wool felting needle. If you have a wool felting needle, they're very handy for packing filling in and having it stay put, because when you're filling something that has a narrow top and a wide base that you're filling from, filling tends to want to escape out. So that little wool felting needle will help you pack that all in. So I'm going to go ahead and get that all filled out. And there we go. So that has my little body all filled out nicely, and you can see that's quite firm. So now I've gone ahead and used my felting needle, as I said, and I've packed all of that fibre in there, and I've been able to make that base really nice and flat. You can see that that really doesn't have any give there, and it's not difficult to do. You just stab away, and I've got it filled to about 1.5 centimetres from that outer edge. And then I have taken my extra strong thread, and I've got a doubled length of it, and I've sewn, you can see there, I've done it in this colour so you can see, I've sewn a little running stitch all the way around that edge, leaving my tail ends hanging, come right around there so that I can pull that one in, because now we're going to pop in our little disc, whether you've got a wooden disc or your little cardboard piece. We just tuck that one in there, and you can see it will sit nice and flat, and then we can pull on those threads and that little base will pull in nicely. It's important to make sure that your little running stitch, those stitches are nice and small so it gathers in nice and evenly. So now we don't need to pull it all the way into the center, we just need it pulled in enough to really cover those edges, so it's okay if you've got some showing. I'm going to tie that off about 3 times and show you how that looks. So you can see that has that base pulled in just enough to cover those little edges and all tied off nicely. Make sure it's all even and make sure it's nice and flat. You can test it out by standing him up. As soon as we put that little base plate on there, that will make him more stable. So I have my little felt base cover all glued up. I'm just using a clear craft glue, something suitable for fabric and something quite quick drying, and all we're going to do is just place that over. Make sure that you get it all lined up nice and central. Push that one down, make sure that all of those edges are nice and firmly glued, and we're going to set that one aside just for a little while to dry before we go ahead and we're going to sew our blanket applique stitching. So my little base disc is all dry now, and I'm going to sew around mine. I'm using a contrasting thread that matches my little bear colour, and I'm using a pearl thread. I like something just with a bit more substance. So I've got a knot in the end of single thread. You can see there that I've just come in on that edge and hidden my little knot between those layers there, and come out here just on the edge, and we're just going to sew that same blanket applique stitch, probably making them about 4 millimeters. Just make sure that you're catching that the layer that is the little body. So you're taking your needle through and catching some of that, because we want to bring those 2 edges together, making sure that your needle comes through the loop each time. And as you can see, it's just the same stitch. It's very easy to do, and it's very easy to get out on this section, and it does give us a really nice little professional finish, especially if you're going to be making these and selling them. These are such a great product for selling at markets and or online. They're great for children's nurseries and just gifts for office workers. They're just a happy little product, and you're most welcome to make product from my patterns and sell them. That's my way of paying it forward to you all. You just can't sell the pattern, that's all. So you can see there, that little stitch is going to just bring those edges together beautifully, and I'm just going to work that one all the way around. Now that has a little base stitched nicely into place. You can see that gives us such a little nice finish on that edge there. And that is our little bear's body all done. So we can just pop him aside and we can get started working on the head. So we start with one of our head pieces, our full head pieces. And we take, first of all, our white felt piece and remove our backing paper. And we're going to be pressing on that one. There's a little V. You can see there's a little V in that shape. This is the bottom of that little chin. I'm going to press that one into place with a hot iron and a protective cloth, and then we straight away do the same thing with the little face mask piece, and we press that one over to cover. Make sure that you get all of those edges down and press that one on also. Once you have that little mask piece pressed on, you can see that we've got a nice white showing underneath. I'm going to take my extra strong thread in black because I really want to mark out the outside of these eyes. Now what we're going to be sewing is the same little blanket applique stitch, only we're sewing it on the outer edge of that circle on each one. The effect we're going to get is the same as our little cow, and it's such a pretty effect. You could just sew on the machine around each eye with a straight stitch. If you're wanting to make them quicker to put together, that you could definitely do that, but I have designed this project in this way to really make the most out of the eyes, because these little designs are all about those little flirty eyes. So if you take the time to do it, you really get such a lovely result. Now we keep our stitches really tiny. You can extend them at the top as you go. If you want your little bear, maybe you're making a little girl bear and you want her to have little flirty eyelashes, you can extend your stitches out. On mine is just a classic little boy, so I'm going to keep those stitches quite small. And you do have to keep them small also, because remember that we're going to be adding our little muzzle piece that's going to sit in there, so you don't want your stitches extending too far out. So it's the same blanket applique stitch that we used before. I've come in from behind right on that edge and just going to take my first tiny little stitch, making sure that I'm catching some of that underneath white felt as well, and coming out through that loop, pulling that one in nice and tight. Very important that when you're sewing these little circles that you rotate your work as you go, so that your little stitches fan out, radiate out all the way. If you don't turn it, you find your stitches have a little bit of a lean on them. So just continue on with that stitch right around that edge with both of those little eye circles. So there you can see those little eyes stitched in there, and it really does make those eyes stand out. So now you can also see I've gone ahead and pressed on my little muzzle piece. Now that I can see how far that stitching goes to, I always do that after stitching the eyes. So I've pressed that one on into place, and you have to make sure we're going to be stitching all around the outside edge, so don't have that one sitting too low. We're doing a little blanket stitch just as we did with our little cow, all around the outside to finish up. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm using my cream extra strong thread. If you're using stranded cotton for doing your embroidery, perhaps just use 2 strands so it's nice and fine. If you use a thread that's too heavy on these little faces, you end up just overpowering it with the stitches. So that's why I use the extra strong thread. It works really well. So I'm going to stitch that same little stitch all the way around, and I'm using the cream that matches because I don't want a dark colour that's going to compete with those eyes. We want those eyes to be the main feature. So there you can see that I stitched on that little muzzle piece in the cream, and then I've gone ahead and pressed on my little nose template, and I have sewn the same little stitch in black around that nose template. Now you could cover that template, nose template, with straight stitches if you like, or you could machine stitch it on again if you're trying to do this a little bit quicker. So now our next step is to draw in our sweet little mouth. Now you can do any kind of shape you like. You might want just your classic little teddy bear V. I like on this one a little bit of a curved little smile. So I've done that by just taking my ruler, and I've just gone straight from that point down just a little bit shorter than 1/2 centimetre. Don't make it too long, it will change the whole look of your bear. And then I've just taken a little, I'm just using a little, it's a little joint, acrylic joint, and I've just popped that there either side and traced those little smile lines. You can use a little button or anything that you have that's the right size. So now I'm going to stitch that little one, that little mouth line in, and I'm using a pearl thread this time. It's 8 ply, so it's not too thick, but I do want it a little bit thicker than my upholstery thread, my extra strong thread. So you can see I'm just going to come out. I've marked that in just with a very fine marker. It's okay that I've done it in black because I'm covering it in black. So you can see I've just come out with my single thread from behind, and I'm going to just follow that little line with little stitches so that my curve travels around well. So I just do this with a little linked back stitch. So now I'm going to come out from behind again, just a little bit further along that mouth line. Take your time to do this because it's worth getting a really nice clear little line. Back through, and then I'm going to go back into that hole that I just came out of, and that way this little stitch is going to be linked the whole way. There won't be any spaces, so it'll be a nice clear little line. You can see that there. So I'm just going to go up to the center of that nose and to the other side. So there you can see I have my little mouth now nicely marked out there, and I've sewn my little eyes in place. I put mine as little side glancing eyes. You can put them anywhere you like, but they look good when they are able to sort of tilt their little head. Little side glancing eyes look wonderful. So my next step is to join the front of our assembled head to the back head. You can see there that I've glued on already my little stiffened felt head filler. So that one goes on first. Now I've glued up that base, and I just have to drop my little teddy bear head in place on top, making sure that I'm really lining up those little ears, sliding them into place, pressing all of those edges together, making that nice and flat. And then we're going to be sewing our final blanket stitch around the entire outside of that head. So just take your time to get all those edges pressed together, and then we will set that one aside and let that dry. So my little face section is all nice and dry now, so I'm going to go ahead and start sewing my little final stitching around that head. So I'm using, this time I'm using pearl thread because there's quite a few thicknesses. Again, it's only an 8 ply, and I'm using just a dark brown. I don't want to go as dark as black. Again, I don't want to be competing with those eyes, so I am just going to be sewing a standard blanket stitch. So we start, I've tucked my little knot in there, it's a single thread, tuck my little knot in between the layers and come out here on the edge, and I'm going to be keeping my stitches quite small, so it's just a little binding stitch for the edge. Now if you haven't sewn a blanket stitch before, I'm going to put a little link up the top there for you that shows you exactly how to sew that one. I've got a video that shows you how to sew it, but basically it is just going through both of your layers and coming out through your loop and pulling that little stitch in, which binds those two edges together there. And again, we want to keep these stitches quite small. I don't want to be overpowering our little face, but it does look good to have a dark colour around that edge because it gives it a very animated look. You can see each time I'm just going through both layers, bringing my thread out through the loop each time, And then we're getting that lovely little binding stitch that's closed those two edges there. Now, once we get up, so I've started here at the on one side of the cheeks there. I'm going to be stitching that blanket stitch up until we get to here. And then I'm going to change over to a blanket applique stitch again, just to do this section across the ear. Once we finish across that ear, we go back to a blanket stitch, right the way around to here, change over again to a blanket applique, and then a blanket stitch all the way around to meet up there. And then we're going to separately blanket stitch each of those little ears. The reason why we do it this way is because we get a nice definition between the ear and the top of the head. So go ahead and make your way right the way around that little face. So that has our sweet little teddy bear head all done. So now all we need to do is add that head to our little body. So I have my medium-sized doll needle threaded with a double thread pass through that eye of my extra strong thread. So now I've got 4 threads, so it's really going to be nice and strong. Now what you want to do is have a little look at your little bear from the front and decide just how low you want that little head to sit. I like to show enough of that little neckline off there. Just have a check with the range of motion there, and then you'll be able to get an idea of where on the head you're going to take that little bite out of it with your needle. You can put a little mark there like I have if you like, to position where your little button is going to go, and it's just a little way down from the top there. We'll be compressing that all in. So we're going to start with taking our needle and we're going to go in. I'm going to go in just one side of that little mark that I've made. Oops, got to add my button first. You can use a 4-hole or a 2-hole button. It makes no difference. We only use 2 of those holes anyway. Now when you're going through here and passing through with that needle, make sure you're going through straight. Don't be going up at an angle. So you want to come straight out the front there. Make sure it's in just one side of the center. And we're going to take that one through. We want to keep that button on, so we don't want that falling out. So now we're going to go, I've made a little mark in the middle of my head here, and we're going to take a nice big bite out of that head section there. Not going all the way through the layers, just the back layers, so that we don't distort that little face shape. Make sure that you're going straight across and that it's nice and central. Might take a few goes to get that where you want it. Just want that a little bit further. And if you don't get this in the right position first time, it's not a problem, because you can just pull it out and reposition it. So I've taken enough of that head that it's going to sit nice and flat. So now of course I'm just going to go straight back in, just this side. Gather up my threads that has my button on it, the other side. Come out at the back there. And I'm going to go through the opposite hole. It's a lot easier to do off camera, but you get the idea. So you also want to make sure that your threads, once you've pulled them all through, you should have like a little pulley system happening here. Make sure that they're not twisted. And you can pull that one in, and you just want to check your positioning. So you can check that out, make sure your little head is in the right spot. Once you're happy with that, you want to really compress that in, and then you're just going to tie off your first knot, and then make sure that's nice and firm, and then knot off at least 3 or 4 times. And you can snip those ends, or you can send those ends back into the body through those buttonholes and lose those thread ends into the body. So I'm going to get that one all tied off. And so there we go, that completes a beautiful little teddy bear shelf sitter. And I can't wait to see what you're all going to do with this one. Somebody needs to make this little one up in little girly colours and some pretty floral overalls. I'm really looking forward to that. I won't get time, but I will enjoy seeing all of your photos. So when we pop them together, of course, I've made my little, remember that, I've made my little side glancing eyes because I'm going to be standing them next to each other. They're glancing at each other like that. Here's looking at you, kid. So it's so sweet when they're all lined up on a shelf as they were intended to sit on a shelf, but they look really lovely, and I'm definitely adding to this collection, so we'll have a whole range of them. I certainly hope you've enjoyed making this little one with me today. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I thought I would take this opportunity to introduce you to my latest little grandpuppy. Not so little, she's about 4 or 5 months old, and she has come to me to stay with me for about 3 months to have some serious training, because trust me, she needed it. And she's absolutely beautiful actually. Her name is Lulu, and her training is going very well. When she first arrived a couple of weeks ago, you were a crocodile, weren't you? She really was. So you might be seeing more of her. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, and I'll try and keep you all updated on the training process, and you'll see how she's coming along. She's doing really well. So looking forward to my next video. So long as little Lulu allows me the time, there should be a lovely little mini quilt coming up. Make sure that you keep sending me your photos. I'm really enjoying seeing those. If you send them to me directly on Pinterest, then we can I can pin them straight away directly from there. It's probably much easier. Keep talking to me in the comments, and tell me what you'd like to see moving forward. Everybody make sure that you stay safe and well, and keep being creative, and I will continue trying to teach this little one some manners while designing for you all. So most of all, everybody, remember, all of the good things that come to you in your day, make sure that you don't keep them just for yourself. Make sure that you pay them forward. And until next time, it's hooray from me, and it's hooray from Lulu today.